It's an environment special this week, bringing you stories all about our natural surroundings. And we start with plastic pollution. Empty bottles and crisp wrappers littering our beaches are a horrible sight. But are they more than just an eyesore? Emma Thomas has been finding out.
It's a major threat to sea life. Plastic polluting the oceans is becoming a global problem. If there's plastic pollution in the world's oceans, has it arrived here in the southeast? Rottingdean Beach, where kids from St Margaret's Primary School are on a mission.
Yes! Yes!
It's future generations that will be left to pick up the pieces. The children behind me are fighting a tide of plastic. What they're doing is a small but important step. More than 8 million tonnes of plastic goes into our world's oceans every year.
We've found plastic bottles, ropes, nets, and I think it's very terrible because it can hurt every sea mammal in the ocean.
I think it's really sad because we have left it and it's our fault that this is happening to the animals and it's not okay.
Loads of bottles, plastic cups. Well done, guys, you deserve a huge round of applause. Well done. You should be very proud of yourselves.
And why are you so concerned by this?
If we keep going using plastic at the rate we're using it, they suggest that there are going to be more plastics in the ocean than there are fish by 2050, which is a scary thought.
But it's much more than just an eyesore on the beach. Just as rock breaks down into sand, plastic breaks down into tiny particles called microplastics, and that has experts worried. Environmental scientists like Stephanie Wright are increasingly turning their attention to the growing problem of plastics in our seas.
So it's been estimated that up to 8 million tonnes of plastic per year can enter the sea from land, and that's predicted to accumulate over time. There are species which have been sampled all around the world which have been found to contain microplastics in them. So this suggests that the microplastics are getting into the food chain. So we still don't really understand the repercussions of this, but we can gauge that these particles are going to persist and build up, and ultimately we could be exposed to them.
Rob Dyer is from the Kent and Essex Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority.
We don't even know how much of this microplastic is in the environment because without taking samples and analysing those samples, it's not apparent that there's plastic there.
We want to find out more about microplastics in the environment, so we're going to collect some mussels from around the Kent coast and test them for microplastic. First stop is Herne Bay Pier. We can already see bits of plastic in the water here, like that cone.
Yeah, I guess this is classic English coastline, pier going out, muddy, the traffic cones. Okay.
Yes. Gosh,
you
have to be careful around here when we're collecting these mussels. In amongst all this glorious mud, clumps of mussels are growing, but they're surrounded by plastic. Already under this bridge, I can see quite a bit of plastic waste.
Yes, you can see there's some fishing net here, old scraps of fishing net wrapped around the base of the pier. There's the reel from a crab line, and you can see some orange crab lines that are just hanging down here where kids have obviously been crabbing out on the pier.
We set about collecting our mussels for the test.
Maybe this one. Get around there.
He's a bit too small, isn't he? I think we might have to leave him behind for... He gets to live another day this
He can be on the next show.
Right, let's take his big brother and come over here. Herne Bay mussels in the bag. The rest of the day was a race against the tide. We hit 4 spots on the Kent coast. We're also collecting mussels from Reculver, Dover and Ramsgate before bringing them all to King's College in London, where Dr. Stephanie Wright is going to test them for microplastics. So how are you going to test the mussels?
So we're going to digest the mussels in a strong alkaline solution which breaks down the mussel tissue. Once we have this solution, we filter it, and then we dry the filters and inspect them under a microscope to identify microplastic particles. and then we do a chemical analysis which would tell us the exact composition of those particles. This is actually one of the first studies to look in UK mussels. We know that mussels from China, from Belgium and from Canada are contaminated with microplastics, but this is the first time we've looked in the UK.
But in the meantime, what can be done about plastic pollution? Earlier we met Libby Darling from Rottingdean. She's taking us on her weekly shop to show us how she shuns plastic as much as possible. She avoids single-use, throwaway plastic packaging by taking reusable plastic boxes with her.
Oh, that's perfect, thank you. And I'd like a chicken, a nice large chicken.
Large chicken.
If I was to buy chicken in a supermarket, it would come in a meat tray with a bit of paper plastic underneath and then wrapped in a massive piece of cellophane. But as soon as you use that chicken and cook that chicken, you remove and throw that in the bin. There you go, will it fold up in there?
Go in there, wonderful.
It'll fit. Perfect, brilliant. Thank you.
On the rounds, Libby avoids as much unnecessary plastic packaging as she can.
Hello, Vicky. I've come to buy my bread. Are you okay to take it out of plastic for me? Oh, brilliant, thank you.
And the shopkeepers are helpful as well.
Oh, lovely. Thanks very much. That's brilliant.
And do people mind you doing this?
People like Vicky are really, really understanding. They don't look at me as if I'm some sort of alien. You just ask, say, please, can you take it out of the plastic?
So that's one way of reducing our reliance on plastics. But now it's time for the results of our test. Stephanie has been hard at work in the lab and can tell us her findings. So what can you see there?
So this is a blue synthetic microfibre in one of the mussel samples. And actually in this particular sample there's quite a lot of fibres.
More than half of the mussels had plastic in them. Ramsgate came out worst with 8 out of 10 mussels containing microplastics, followed by Reculver where 7 out of 10 were affected. In Dover, half the mussels had plastic in. And surprisingly, Herne Bay, where plastic was most visible, came out the lowest with 4 out of 10 affected. Do the results surprise you?
Yeah, I was surprised by the results. So quite a large number of mussels were contaminated with microplastic.
Where has this plastic come from?
So the majority of particles that we found were fragments and fibres. So this could be from larger bits of plastic litter which degrade and fragment, or it could be from clothing and textiles which wear and shed fibres.
Rob Dyer from IFCA says this could have a serious impact on the mussel population.
The uptake of these plastics into mussel tissue could stress these mussels. It could reduce their ability to reproduce.
In one mussel alone from Reculver, there were 5 pieces of plastic.
I guess what's important to note is that these mussels were taken from the environment directly, whereas what we eat come from the shop floor or a shelf where the mussels have undergone a sort of cleaning process.
Is this concerning in terms of human health?
This is a really big unknown question. We just don't know. We're at the start of this research field. So first of all, the particle could just pass through the gut and not cause any effect. Secondly, as the particle passes through the gut, it could release associated contaminants, and these are chemicals with known human health effects. Then there's potential, if size is small enough, for interaction with our cells and our gut lining. If this were to happen, then that could trigger an inflammatory response. And if it happens over a long term, it can cause local tissue damage and scarring.
We showed the results to IFCA. They described them as shocking. They said some predator species would be eating a lot of mussels and expressed their concern about plastics entering the food chain.
Other animals don't pick and choose. They're just going to eat the animal whether it has plastic in it or not. So these particles are getting into the food chain, they're persistent and they could be accumulating, and they could be getting into food chains which we're at the top of.